The diamond on Rosalind's finger felt heavier than a shackle, a cold, glittering reminder of the lie her life had become. To the world, she was the wife of Sterling Blackwood, a self-made tech millionaire who lived in a glass tower that scraped the New York sky. But within those silent, sterile walls, she was just a ghost in second-hand clothes. He called her his charity case, his little rustic project. Now, with their first child growing beneath her heart, his mockery had sharpened into a weapon. He didn't know the secret she guarded, a secret locked away in the annals of old money and dynastic power, a truth so vast it could swallow his new money empire whole, and not even register the meal. Tonight, at the annual Blackwood Foundation Gala, he planned to parade his poor, pregnant wife as a testament to his own magnanimity. He had no idea he wasn't hosting a party. He was orchestrating his own downfall. The penthouse on the 80th floor of One Vanderbilt was less a home and more a monument to Sterling Blackwood's ego. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of Manhattan, a sprawling kingdom of light and ambition that Sterling believed he had conquered. Every surface was cold, hard, and impossibly clean. Italian marble, polished chrome, black lacquer. It was a space designed to be admired, not lived in, much like Rosalind Hayes felt she was. For 2 years, she had tried to breathe life into the sterile expanse. A hand-thrown pottery vase she'd bought at a street fair was relegated to a cleaning closet. A colourful, hand-knitted Afghan was deemed tacky and disappeared. Sterling wanted everything to reflect his brand, new, sharp, and relentlessly modern. Rosalind, with her soft-worn cardigans and preference for dog-eared paperbacks over sterile e-readers, was a glaring, organic flaw in his minimalist masterpiece. Their courtship had been a whirlwind. He'd been captivated by her quiet grace and genuine smile, a refreshing anomaly in a world of calculated connections. He'd called her his real girl. But as his company, Apex Financial Solutions, skyrocketed in value, his affection began to curdle into condescension. Her lack of pedigree, once a charming novelty, became an embarrassment. "Rosalind, for God's sake, what is that?" he'd asked one evening, his voice laced with the weary disdain he usually reserved for incompetent junior analysts. He was pointing at the simple, gold-filled locket around her neck. "It was my mother's," she answered softly, her hand instinctively covering the worn oval. "It looks like something you'd find in a cereal box," he sniffed, turning back to his tablet. "We're meeting Carter and Jessica Vance for dinner at Per Se tonight. I'll have my assistant send over something from Tiffany's. Try not to look like you just wandered in from a farm in Ohio." She wasn't from a farm. She was from a quiet, tree-lined street in a forgotten corner of Connecticut, raised by a single mother who had valued books over bank balances. That was the story she had told him, and it was true as far as it went. She'd just omitted the part about the street being the service entrance to a sprawling 20-acre estate, and the books being first editions bound in Moroccan leather. The cruelty had escalated when she told him she was pregnant. She had hoped the news would mend the growing chasm between them, that the prospect of a family would rekindle the warmth he'd once shown. Instead, it had given him a new angle for his mockery. "My heir," he'd declared, a smirk playing on his lips as he surveyed her in the morning light. "Let's just hope the baby inherits my ambition, and not your simple sensibilities. We can't have a Blackwood scion thinking a trip to the public library is a major cultural event." Tonight was the Blackwood Foundation Gala, the pinnacle of Sterling's social calendar. It was an extravagant affair designed to cement his status among New York's philanthropic elite, and he had a special role for Rosalind. He found her in their cavernous walk-in closet, staring at the dress he had chosen for her. It was a sheath of shimmering, silver fabric by a designer whose name was spoken in hushed, reverent tones. It was beautiful, but it felt like a costume. "Perfect," he said, coming up behind her. His hands rested on her shoulders, but his touch was proprietary, not affectionate. "It'll hang on you beautifully. We need to accentuate your delicate state. It plays well." The magnanimous Sterling Blackwood, lifting his lovely, humble wife into the stratosphere. He gestured to a velvet box on the dresser. "And this." She opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of white satin, was a diamond necklace so bright it hurt to look at. It wasn't a gift. It was a prop. It was a price tag he was hanging around her neck to show everyone how much she was worth to him. "Sterling, it's too much," she whispered. "Nonsense. It's an investment in our image." He paused, his gaze hardening, as he noticed the simple, thin gold band on her ring finger, her actual wedding ring, the one they'd picked out together in a small, dusty jewelry shop downtown before he became Sterling Blackwood. "You're not wearing that tonight. You'll wear the 10-carat rock I got you for our first anniversary, the one that actually looks like we can afford our life." Each word was a carefully placed stone, building a wall between them. She felt the familiar sting behind her eyes, the burn in her throat. She had held on to the hope that the man she married was still in there somewhere, buried beneath layers of arrogance and insecurity. "I was thinking," he continued, oblivious to her inner turmoil, "during my speech, I might talk a little about your background. Nothing too specific, of course. Just a touching little anecdote about how I found this diamond in the rough. It'll make the old money dinosaurs in the room feel generous when they write their checks. People love a good rags-to-riches story." He wasn't talking about his own story. He was talking about hers. He was going to paint a picture of her as a penniless waif he had rescued from obscurity, and he expected her to stand there, pregnant with his child, and smile gratefully. A quiet, cold resolve began to form in the pit of her stomach. She had endured the private snubs, the backhanded compliments, the slow erosion of her identity. She had told herself it was for the sake of their marriage, and now for the sake of their child. But to be publicly humiliated, to have her carefully constructed, private life turned into a cheap marketing ploy, that was a line she didn't know he would cross. "Don't look so morose, darling," he said, kissing the top of her head with a chilling lack of warmth. "This is a celebration, our celebration. Tonight, everyone will see just how lucky you are to be Mrs. Blackwood." As he walked away, Rosalind looked at her reflection in the mirror. The pale, tired woman staring back was a stranger, but deep within her eyes, a flicker of something else was igniting. It was the dormant fire of a lineage she had long since abandoned. The Vanderbilts were not known for their simplicity. They were known for building empires and crushing their enemies. Sterling Blackwood was about to learn that you can take the girl out of the dynasty, but you can't take the dynasty out of the girl. The days leading up to the gala were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Sterling, energized by the prospect of his grand performance, seemed to find new ways to underscore Rosalind's perceived inadequacies. He treated their shared life as a continuous project of refinement, with her as the unpolished primary subject. One afternoon, his mother, Beatrice Blackwood, came for tea. Beatrice was a woman who had clawed her way into society on the coattails of her late husband's modest manufacturing business, a fortune Sterling had leveraged and multiplied tenfold. She possessed all the snobbery of old money with none of its subtlety. "Rosalind, dear," Beatrice began, her eyes scanning the minimalist living room with approval. "Sterling tells me you're finally getting the hang of things. It must be so overwhelming for you." She picked up a decorative silver orb from the coffee table, polishing it with her thumb as if to remove some invisible smudge of poverty. "I'm managing just fine, Beatrice," Rosalind said, her voice even. She poured the tea, her hands steady. "Of course you are. You're a trooper." The compliment was delivered with the same inflection one might use for a well-behaved pet. "It's just, well, with the baby coming, standards are so important. We wouldn't want the child picking up any unrefined habits." Beatrice's gaze flickered pointedly toward Rosalind's simple flat shoes, tucked neatly by the sofa. Sterling, who had been observing from his armchair, chimed in. "Mother is right, Rosie. We need to start thinking about legacy. I was looking at preschools. There's a waiting list for the Dalton school that's 3 years long. We'll have to get our name on it now. I'll have to pull some strings, of course, given your lack of legacy connections." It was a conversation designed to exclude and diminish her. They spoke of her child as if it were a future commodity, a Blackwood asset whose value could be depreciated by her own history. She sat silently, the warmth from her teacup a small, inadequate comfort. Later that day, Sterling found her in the spare room she had hoped to turn into a nursery. She was unpacking a small wooden box, a collection of her most treasured possessions. Inside were faded photographs of her mother, a collection of sea glass they had gathered on a beach in Maine, and a worn copy of The Little Prince with her mother's handwritten notes in the margins. "What's all this junk?" Sterling asked from the doorway, his tone a familiar blend of curiosity and disgust. "They were my mother's," Rosalind said, her back to him. He picked up one of the smooth green pieces of sea glass. "You know, we could have a proper nursery designed. I saw a feature in Architectural Digest, fully automated crib, cashmere walls. We don't need it cluttered with sentiment." He tossed the piece of glass back into the box with a dismissive clink. That was the core of their disconnect. To him, things were valuable because of their price. To her, they were valuable because of their story. His entire identity was built on what he had acquired. Hers was built on what she had loved and lost. She had tried once, early in their marriage, to tell him the truth. They were lying in bed, the city lights a soft glow against the ceiling. "Sterling," she had begun, her heart pounding. "There's something about my family I haven't told you." He was scrolling through stock market futures on his phone. "My mother's family. They're not simple people. There's a history, a rather complicated one." He put his phone down, a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. "Oh? Are you telling me you're descended from horse thieves? Don't worry, darling. I'm not a snob. Your past is your past." The comment, meant to be reassuring, was so patronizing, so utterly dismissive of the gravity of what she was trying to say, that the words died in her throat. He had already cast her in a role, and he wasn't interested in a revised script. He wanted her to be poor. It made his own story, the story of the great Sterling Blackwood, that much more heroic. To learn she came from anything other than abject poverty would spoil his narrative. So she had let it drop. The silence had been a small betrayal then. Now it felt like a catastrophic failure. The night before the gala, the pressure became unbearable. Sterling was rehearsing his speech in front of the living room's vast windows, using his reflection as an audience. "And so, when I met Rosalind," he boomed, gesturing to an imaginary her, "I saw a spirit untouched by the cynicism of our world. A woman of simple means, but with a wealth of character." He paused, turning to the real Rosalind, who was curled on the sofa. "What do you think? Is simple means too on the nose? Or should I say, humble origins? "Sterling, please don't," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Please don't talk about me in your speech." His face hardened. "Why not? It's a wonderful story. It's our story." "No, it's your story. It's a version of me you invented to make yourself look good." He scoffed, pacing the marble floor. "Oh, I see. You're ashamed of where you come from. I'm trying to tell the world that it doesn't matter, that I love you despite it all, and you're throwing it back in my face. How ungrateful." Ungrateful? The word struck a nerve, sharp and painful. "I'm not a project, Sterling. I'm your wife. I am the mother of your child. I am not a stepping stone for your social climbing. You knew who I was when you married me." He shot back, his voice rising. "You knew what this world was like. Did you really think you could marry me and we'd spend our weekends tending a vegetable patch in some quaint cottage? This is the life. This is what I've built. And you are a part of the brand now. You need to start acting like it." He snatched the silver-framed photo from the side table. It was their wedding picture. They were smiling, and for a moment she could remember the feeling of his hand in hers, the genuine belief that their love could conquer anything. "Look at you," he said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "You were a nobody, a pretty face with nothing to your name. I gave you everything. This apartment, the clothes on your back, the food you eat, the diamonds I have to beg you to wear. I gave you a name. And tomorrow night, you will stand by my side, and you will smile, and you will look grateful for the incredible life I have provided. Do you understand me?" He didn't wait for an answer. He slammed the photo back down, the glass cracking with a sharp retort that echoed in the silent, cavernous room. He stormed off toward their bedroom, leaving Rosalind alone with the fractured image of their marriage. She walked over and picked up the frame. A thin, spiderweb crack ran right between their smiling faces. It was a perfect metaphor. She traced the line with her finger. For months, she had been trying to hold the pieces together, to pretend the damage wasn't there. But the cracks were too deep. The entire structure was about to shatter. And as she stood there, with the weight of her past and the fear for her future pressing down on her, she knew she couldn't let him be the one to bring the whole thing crashing down in a public spectacle. If it was going to break, she would be the one to choose how. The ballroom at the plaza was a symphony of excess. Crystal chandeliers, weighing as much as small cars, dripped light onto a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. The air hummed with the buzz of polite conversation, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the subtle, relentless thrum of power. Every person in the room was a player, a donor, a connection. And tonight, Sterling Blackwood was positioning himself to be king. Rosalind stood by his side, a silent, silver-clad satellite to his blazing sun. The diamond necklace felt like a brand on her skin, cold and heavy. She smiled when he touched the small of her back. She nodded when he introduced her to titans of industry and their immaculately preserved wives. Her name was mentioned, but their eyes slid past her, landing on her burgeoning belly and then back to Sterling, the man of the hour. She was an accessory, proof of his virility and his supposed depth of character. "Sterling, my boy, a magnificent event," boomed a portly man with a florid face, clapping Sterling on the shoulder. He was Robert Driscoll, a real estate mogul with a ruthless reputation. His eyes, small and sharp, flicked to Rosalind. "And this must be the lovely wife. He never stops talking about you." "Rosalind, this is Robert Driscoll." "Robert, my better half," Sterling said with a proprietary grin. "A pleasure," Rosalind said, extending a hand. Driscoll ignored it, his gaze fixed on Sterling. "Found yourself a real gem, eh, Blackwood?" down to earth, keeps a man grounded. The exchange was a perfect microcosm of her experience. She was an object to be discussed, not a person to be engaged. The evening wore on in a blur of forced smiles and empty pleasantries. Beatrice Blackwood held court at a central table, accepting compliments on her son's success as if they were her own. Every time her gaze fell on Rosalind, it was with a look of critical assessment, a silent reminder to stand up straight, to smile wider, to be a better prop. Finally, the moment arrived. The lights dimmed slightly, and Sterling was introduced to a round of enthusiastic applause. He strode to the podium, basking in the spotlight. He was a natural performer, his voice confident and charismatic as he spoke about the Foundation's work, about empowering underprivileged youth, about giving back to the city that had given him so much. Rosalind watched from their table, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. She felt the baby kick, a small, insistent flutter, as if it, too, sensed the impending storm. "But my success is not my own," Sterling said, his voice softening, drawing the room in. "It is built on the support and inspiration of the people I love. Most importantly, my incredible wife, Rosalind." He gestured for her to stand. A spotlight found her, pinning her in its glare. Reluctantly, she rose, her hands clasped in front of her. The applause felt like a wave of heat, suffocating her. "Now, many of you in this room were born into a world of comfort and privilege," Sterling continued, his eyes sweeping across the audience of heirs and CEOs. "I was not. I built my company from nothing, and Rosalind comes from an even humbler place than I do." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This was not the standard, bland spousal tribute. This was something different. It was intimate, and it was cruel. When I met her, she was a waitress, working double shifts to make ends meet, with a spirit that shone brighter than any of the jewels in this room tonight. This was a complete fabrication. She had been working part-time at a quiet bookstore cafe while finishing her art history degree at Columbia, a degree her grandfather had grudgingly funded. But the fiction was better for his story. A waitress was so much more romantically destitute. "I fell in love with a woman who had nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart full of gold," he went on, his voice thick with faux emotion. "She reminds me every day what truly matters. She is my touchstone to reality, my constant reminder of the world outside our gilded cages." He paused, letting the weight of his manufactured sentiment settle over the room. People were dabbing their eyes. Beatrice was beaming with pride. They were all lapping it up. They saw a great man, a benevolent king who had plucked a commoner from obscurity and elevated her to his side. They didn't see the truth. They didn't see the constant belittling, the chipping away of her self-worth, the slow, agonizing death of their love. They saw a fairy tale. She was living in a horror story. "So tonight, as you consider your donations," Sterling concluded, his eyes finding hers across the room, "I want you to think of Rosalind. Think of the potential that lies hidden in every corner of this city, waiting for a chance. She is my greatest investment. And now, carrying our first child, she is the embodiment of the future we are all trying to build." He raised his glass. "To my wife, Rosalind, my beautiful, perfect charity case." The room erupted in applause. The final two words, delivered with a loving smile, were for her alone. A secret, vicious little twist of the knife. Charity case. Something inside Rosalind broke. It wasn't a loud, dramatic snap, but a quiet, clean fracture. The tears that welled in her eyes were not of gratitude or pride. They were glass tears, sharp and cold. She did not let them fall. She held the gaze of her husband, the stranger on the stage, and for the first time, she did not try to hide the pain in her eyes. She let him see it. She let him see the ruin he had made. For a fleeting second, a flicker of something, shock, guilt, crossed his face. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the triumphant smile of a man who had just conquered the world. She sat down, her movements stiff and robotic. She endured the rest of the dinner, the fawning congratulations, the pats on her shoulder. She was a statue, a perfect model of the grateful wife. But inside she was already gone. She was packing a mental suitcase, walking out a mental door. When they finally returned to the sterile silence of the penthouse, Sterling was euphoric. Did you see their faces, Rosie? They loved it. Driscoll pledged $500,000. We're the new power couple in this city. He loosened his bow tie, energized and triumphant. You were perfect, the perfect picture of grace. Rosalind walked past him into the bedroom. She began to remove the jewelry, piece by piece, the heavy earrings, the glittering bracelet. Finally, the necklace. She laid it on his dresser, the diamonds winking coldly under the halogen lights. You called me your charity case, she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. He had the grace to look momentarily abashed. Oh, that. It was just a turn of phrase, darling. A little flourish for the story. It wasn't a story, Sterling. It was my life. And you sold it for applause. She turned to face him, and he finally saw that the woman who had been standing by his side all night was gone. In her place was someone he didn't recognize, someone with eyes as hard and unyielding as the diamonds he so admired. I'm leaving, she said. He laughed, a short, incredulous bark. Leaving? Don't be so dramatic. Where would you go? Back to waiting tables? You have nothing, Rosalind. Everything you are is because of me. That, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, is where you are profoundly mistaken. She walked to the closet, not to her side with its designer gowns, but to the back, where a single, worn canvas duffel bag was stored, the bag she'd arrived with 2 years ago. He watched, a mixture of amusement and irritation on his face, as she pulled it out. This was a tantrum, he thought. A little hormonal outburst. She would pack a few things, he would let her stew for an hour, and then he would graciously forgive her. But she didn't pack the clothes he'd bought her. She packed her worn paperbacks, the small wooden box of her mother's things, a few simple sweaters. She took off the 10-carat diamond ring and placed it next to the necklace. She slid her simple gold wedding band back onto her finger. When she was done, she walked to the door, the duffel bag slung over her shoulder. This is insane, Rosalind, he said, his voice finally losing its cocky edge. You can't just walk out. You're pregnant with my child. I am pregnant with my child, she corrected him, her hand resting on her belly. And I will not raise them in a house where their mother is seen as a project, a prop, or a charity case. She opened the door and walked out into the hallway without a backward glance. The heavy door clicked shut behind her, the sound as final as a gavel. Sterling Blackwood stood alone, in his monument to himself, utterly bewildered. He was the king of the world, and his queen had just abdicated. The taxi ride from the gleaming spire of One Vanderbilt to a fourth-floor walk-up in the West Village felt like a journey between planets. Rosalind stared out the window, the glittering lights of the city blurring into abstract streaks. The adrenaline that had propelled her out of the penthouse was beginning to fade, leaving behind a deep, trembling exhaustion. She paid the driver with the last $80 she had in her wallet, a small emergency stash she kept hidden from Sterling. She climbed the creaking stairs to apartment 4B, her duffel bag feeling heavier with each step. She knocked softly. The door swung open to reveal her oldest friend, Penelope Penny Jones, a whirlwind of curly red hair, paint-splattered overalls and worried eyes. "Rosie, my God, I got your text. Get in here." Penny pulled her into a fierce hug that smelled of turpentine and chamomile tea. Penny's apartment was the antithesis of the penthouse. It was small, warm, and chaotic. Books were stacked on every available surface, canvases leaned against the walls, and a fat ginger cat named Marmalade blinked lazily from a pile of cushions. It was a home. Rosalind felt the tension in her shoulders release for the first time in years. The glass tears she had held back all night finally fell, hot and silent. "He called me his charity case," she whispered into Penny's shoulder, "in front of 1,000 people." "That man," Penny said, her voice a low growl, "is a walking, talking, vacant lot with a view." "I never liked him." She guided Rosalind to a well-worn sofa, pushed the cat aside, and wrapped a quilt around her. "Tea, and then you tell me everything." As Penny bustled in the tiny kitchen, Rosalind looked around the apartment. On the wall was a framed photograph of the two of them in college, bright-eyed and full of dreams, long before Sterling Blackwood and the weight of his world had entered her life. It felt like a picture of a different person. Over steaming mugs of tea, she recounted the entire evening, the words tumbling out of her in a rush of pain and anger. Penny listened, her expression hardening with every detail. "So that's it? You're done?" Penny asked when she'd finished. "I'm done," Rosalind confirmed. The words felt solid, real. "I can't bring a baby into that. I don't want my child to think that love is conditional, that a person's worth is measured by their net worth." "Good," Penny said firmly. "You can stay here as long as you need. We'll figure it out. You can get a job. I can sell a few more paintings. We'll manage." Rosalind smiled, a true, grateful smile. "Thank you, Penny. I knew I could count on you." "Always," Penny said. Then her expression grew serious. "So, are you going to make the call?" Rosalind knew exactly what she meant. The call she hadn't made in over 5 years. The call to a number she knew by heart. The number for the main office at the Vanderbilt estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Her estrangement from her grandfather, Cornelius Vanderbilt, was a wound as deep as the one Sterling had inflicted. Cornelius was a man forged in the crucible of old-world industry and finance. He saw the world in terms of assets, legacies, and strategic alliances. When Rosalind, his only grandchild and heir apparent, had announced her intention to study art history instead of corporate law, he had been displeased. When she had fallen in love with and decided to marry the then up-and-coming, but pedigree-less, Sterling Blackwood, he had been furious. "He is a flash in the pan," Cornelius had thundered, his voice echoing in the cavernous library of the estate. "A self-obsessed peacock with no foundation. Our name, our legacy, has been built over a century. You will not throw it away on some digital charlatan." "I love him, Grandpa," she had pleaded. "Love is a luxury," he had retorted. "Duty is a requirement. You choose him. You choose his world. You will have no part of mine." He had cut her off, not just financially, that she could handle, but emotionally. He had refused to take her calls, returned her letters unopened. Her inheritance, the vast fortune of Vanderbilt Global Holdings, was to be redirected to a charitable trust upon his death. She had been disowned. And so, she had built a new life, a simple one, pretending the Vanderbilt name meant nothing to her. Now, pregnant and alone, with less than $100 to her name, the world her grandfather represented was her only remaining lifeline. Not for the money, but for the safety, the security it could provide for her child. She took a deep breath. I have to. Penny handed her the phone. Rosalind's fingers trembled as she dialed the familiar number. It was late, but she knew someone would answer. The Vanderbilt estate never truly slept. A crisp, familiar voice answered on the second ring. Vanderbilt residence. Abernathy? Is that you? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Miss Rosalind? The voice of Arthur Abernathy, her grandfather's lifelong solicitor and confidant, was filled with disbelief. Yes, Arthur, it's me. My dear child, are you all right? The master has been... He trailed off, his professional composure faltering. I'm fine, Arthur. I need to speak with him. Is he there? Another pause. This one longer, heavier. Miss Rosalind, there is something you need to know. Your grandfather is unwell, very unwell. He has been asking for you. The floor seemed to drop out from under her. All the anger and resentment she held for her grandfather evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. What do you mean, unwell? How long? He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 6 months ago. It is advanced. He didn't want you to be told. He said it would look like he was trying to manipulate you with sentiment. 6 months. While she had been living in her gilded cage, enduring Sterling's cruelty, her grandfather had been dying. The stubborn pride of 2 Vanderbilts had cost them precious time. Arthur, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I need to see him. He is weak, but he is lucid. He has been putting his affairs in order, Abernathy said. In fact, I was instructed to contact you this week. It seems you have made my task easier. There are significant developments regarding the estate and the Vanderbilt Global Charter, developments that directly concern you. Abernathy's tone was formal and weighted with meaning. This was more than a deathbed reconciliation. This was business. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock? He asked. 45 Rockefeller Plaza. I'll be there, she said, her mind reeling. She hung up the phone, the news of her grandfather's illness crashing over her. He was dying. He had been asking for her, and there were developments. Penny put a comforting hand on her arm. What is it? My grandfather is sick, Rosalind said, her eyes distant. He's dying. And something else is happening. Abernathy wants to see me tomorrow. She looked down at her hands, at the simple gold band on her finger. She had run from one world of power and expectation into the arms of a man who created his own toxic version of it. She had tried so hard to be just Rosalind Hayes, a simple woman living a simple life. But she wasn't. She was Rosalind Vanderbilt Hayes, and it seemed her past was not just catching up with her. It was about to collide with her present with the force of a freight train. Sterling Blackwood woke the next morning to 2 things: the deafening silence of the penthouse and a raging hangover. For a moment, he expected to see Rosalind beside him, a placid look on her face, ready to absorb his inevitable apology and move on. The empty space in the bed was a cold, stark reality check. He called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. He sent a text. Rosie, this is ridiculous. Come home, we'll talk. No reply. He sent another. An hour later. Fine, be stubborn. You'll realize you can't survive without me. Silence. He went to his office, a sleek, glass-walled corner of the 60th floor of his own building. He expected to feel powerful, in control. Instead, the triumph of the previous night felt hollow, curdled. He couldn't focus on the market analytics streaming across his multiple monitors. His mind kept replaying the look in Rosalind's eyes just before she'd walked out. It wasn't anger. It was finality. His assistant, A hyper-efficient young woman named Claire knocked on his door. "Mr. Blackwood, page 6 is on line 1. They have some questions about last night's gala." "Put them through," he said, straightening his tie. This was his element. Public relations. "Sterling, Jack from page 6, a slick voice said. "Heard the gala was a smashing success, but we're also hearing some whispers that your lovely wife made a rather hasty exit. Any trouble in paradise?" Sterling's blood ran cold. How could they know already? "Don't be absurd, Jack," he said, forcing a laugh. "Rosalind was just feeling a bit faint. The pregnancy, you know, all the excitement. I sent her home to rest. She's the most important thing to me." It was a plausible lie, and Jack seemed to buy it, for now, but the call was a warning shot. The perfect facade he had so carefully constructed was showing cracks. A pregnant wife leaving a gala early was one thing. A pregnant wife leaving her husband was a scandal. By midday, his anxiety was a frantic buzzing beneath his skin. He called Beatrice. "She actually left?" his mother shrieked, her voice a piercing needle over the phone. "Sterling, you have to fix this. Think of our reputation. What will people say?" "I'm trying, Mother," he snapped. "She's not answering her phone." Well, where could she have gone? Does she have any friends? That dreadful artist girl with the messy hair. Penny, of course. He found her number in Rosalind's old contacts list, which was still synced to the family cloud account. He dialed, his thumb jabbing at the screen. Penny answered on the first ring. "What do you want, Sterling?" "Is she with you?" he demanded, bypassing any pleasantries. "Even if she were, why on earth would I tell you?" Penny's voice was dripping with contempt. "Listen to me, you little bohemian nobody," he snarled, his patience gone. "This is a private matter between my wife and me. Put her on the phone right now." "No," Penny said simply. "And if you ever call this number again, or show up at my door, I'll get a restraining order so fast it'll make your stock price drop. Goodbye, Sterling." She hung up. He slammed his phone down on the desk, a surge of impotent rage washing over him. He was Sterling Blackwood. People didn't hang up on him. Wives didn't walk out on him. The world revolved around him. Or it was supposed to. The afternoon brought more trouble. A call from Robert Driscoll, the real estate mogul. "Sterling," Driscoll began, his jovial tone from the gala gone, replaced by a cool professionalism. "My finance team is reviewing the pledge we discussed. There's some concern. The stability of a man's home life often reflects the stability of his business practices. We're going to hold off on transferring the funds for now, just until the dust settles." It was a veiled message, but the meaning was clear. The whispers were getting louder. His image as the stable, magnanimous family man was a key part of his brand. Without Rosalind by his side, the brand was tarnished. Desperation began to set in. He drove home, the penthouse feeling less like a castle and more like a prison. He walked into their closet and saw her side, half empty. The designer gowns and shoes he'd bought her were still there. She had only taken the simple, inexpensive things she'd arrived with. It was an insult, a calculated rejection of everything he had given her. He saw the cracked picture frame on the bedside table. He picked it up. He had done this. His stupid, arrogant speech, his desire to turn her into a character in his own play, had driven her away. A flicker of genuine remorse sparked within him, but it was quickly extinguished by his ego. She would be back. She had to come back. What other choice did she have? She had no money, no connections, no power. He had it all. It was just a matter of time. He would win her back with a grand gesture. He'd buy her a new car, a private island. He would apologize, of course, but from a position of power. He would be the benevolent husband, forgiving his hysterical, pregnant wife for her outburst. He began to plan his strategy, his mind shifting back to the familiar comfort of tactics and leverage. He saw this not as a crisis of love, but as a hostile negotiation. And Sterling Blackwood never lost a negotiation. He was so engrossed in his own comeback narrative that he didn't notice the black town car that had been parked across the street from his building all afternoon, its occupant watching the entrance with patient, observant eyes. He didn't know that while he was plotting to reclaim his asset, the game had already changed. The board had been flipped, and he wasn't even a player anymore. He was just an obstacle about to be removed. The offices of Abernathy, Finch, and Lowell occupied the entire 50th floor of 45 Rockefeller Plaza. It was a world away from the cold modernity of Sterling's domain. Here, the walls were panelled in dark mahogany, the air smelled of old leather and lemon polish, and the silence was deep and respectful. It was the quiet, unshakable sanctuary of old money. Rosalind, dressed in a simple black dress she'd borrowed from Penny, felt a strange sense of homecoming. This was the world she had run from, but its customs were etched into her bones. Arthur Abernathy greeted her himself. He was a tall, slender man in his late 70s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles and a demeanor of unwavering calm. He had known her since she was a child. "Miss Rosalind," he said, his voice warm. "It is a great relief to see you." He led her into a large, book-lined conference room with a sweeping view of St. Patrick's Cathedral. A thick file, bound in blue leather, sat in the center of the polished table. "Please sit," he said gently. "Would you care for some tea? Water?" "Water would be lovely. Thank you, Arthur." As he poured her a glass from a crystal carafe, she got straight to the point. "How is he?" Abernathy's face fell. "The doctors have given him weeks, perhaps a month. He is comfortable at the estate. He refuses to go to a hospital." Rosalind closed her eyes, absorbing the finality of it. "He asked for me." "Constantly," Abernathy confirmed. "His pride is a formidable thing, my dear, but his love for you is stronger. He regrets the lost yours more than you can know." He slid the blue file across the table toward her. "Which brings us to this. Your grandfather has spent the last few months making radical changes to his estate planning and the controlling charter of Vanderbilt Global Holdings." He opened the file. The documents inside were dense with legal terminology, but Abernathy guided her through them with practiced ease. "As you know, upon your marriage, your grandfather amended his will to leave the entirety of his estate to the Vanderbilt Foundation," he began. "5 days ago, he signed a new last will and testament. It revokes all previous versions." He turned a page, revealing the signature block. Cornelius Vanderbilt's signature, once a bold, authoritative scrawl, was now shaky and thin. But it was unmistakably his. "The new will names you, Rosalind Vanderbilt Hayes, as the sole beneficiary of his entire personal fortune. The properties, the art collections, the trusts. An estimated value of approximately $3 billion. Rosalind felt the air leave her lungs. It was an incomprehensible sum, a number with no basis in reality. But Abernathy wasn't finished. "That, however, is the smaller part of the matter," he said, his expression grave. He tapped the thickest document in the file. "This is the charter for Vanderbilt Global Holdings. It is one of the largest privately held conglomerates in the world, with interests in shipping, real estate, and technology. Its value is difficult to calculate precisely, but a conservative estimate would be north of $15 billion. He let that number hang in the air. Sterling's entire empire, the source of all his pride and arrogance, was a fraction of this. A rounding error. The charter had a complex succession plan involving a board of trustees Abernathy continued, your grandfather has invoked a little-known dynastic succession clause, which required the unanimous consent of the current board, a consent he has secured. Upon his passing, controlling interest and the position of chairman of the board of Vanderbilt Global Holdings will pass directly to you. Rosalind stared at him, speechless. It wasn't just an inheritance. It was an empire, a throne. Why? She finally whispered. After all these years. Why? He told me, Abernathy said, his gaze direct and compassionate, that he spent 5 years trying to protect his legacy from you. And he has spent the last 6 months realizing that his only true legacy is you. He made a mistake, a terrible, prideful mistake. This is his attempt, however late, to rectify it. He slid a final document from the file. It was a pre-signed, notarized petition for divorce. There is one more thing, Abernathy said, his voice dropping. We have been monitoring your husband. My grandfather hired private investigators months ago. He wanted to know what kind of life you were living. They have compiled a comprehensive dossier. He gestured to another, even thicker file on the credenza. His financial overextensions, his questionable business dealings, and his treatment of you. It is all there. Your grandfather referred to Mr. Blackwood as a house of cards in a hurricane. Rosalind felt a chill run down her spine. While she had felt alone and powerless, her grandfather, from a distance, had been watching over her, gathering weapons for a war she didn't even know she could fight. This petition names you as the plaintiff, citing irreconcilable differences. I have also taken the liberty of drafting the terms of a settlement. We will not be asking for alimony. We will be offering him a one-time, sealed payment of $5 million, contingent on the signing of a permanent, unbreakable non-disclosure agreement. He is to never speak your name, or the Vanderbilt name, in public or private, for the rest of his life. It was ruthless. It was brilliant. It was pure Cornelius Vanderbilt. He wasn't just facilitating a divorce. He was buying Sterling's silence, erasing him from her life as cleanly and efficiently as a surgeon excising a tumor. Should he refuse, Abernathy added calmly, the contents of that dossier will be anonymously leaked to the Wall Street Journal and the SEC. I do not believe he will refuse. Rosalind looked down at the documents, at the vast, world-altering power laid out before her. Yesterday, she had been a penniless, pregnant woman running from an emotionally abusive husband. Today, she was one of the wealthiest and most powerful women in the world. She thought of Sterling's smug, triumphant face at the gala. She thought of him calling her his charity case. The irony was so profound it was almost painful. He, who had mocked her for having nothing, had built his entire kingdom on a foundation of debt and bravado. And she, the simple girl he had pitied, was the secret heir to a fortune that could crush him without a second thought. Her hand went to her belly. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was a small, petty emotion. This was about justice. This was about protecting her child, about building a future free from the shadow of a man like Sterling Blackwood. This was about reclaiming her name, her identity, and her power. She picked up a heavy, gold-plated pen from the desk. "Where do I sign?" she asked, her voice clear and steady, the voice of a Vanderbilt. The meeting was held in the neutral territory of Arthur Abernathy's mahogany-paneled conference room. Sterling arrived first, pacing with the impatient arrogance of a man who believed he was there to accept a surrender. He likely imagined a tearful, destitute Rosalind, begging to be taken back. He was unprepared for the woman who entered. Flanked by Abernathy, she was not the timid wife he had tormented, but a figure of serene, unshakable calm. dressed in an elegant navy dress that bespoke quiet power. She met his gaze without a flicker of fear. "Rosalind," Sterling began, attempting a placating tone. "This has gone on long enough. Let's go home." "Please have a seat, Mr. Blackwood," Abernathy interjected, his voice coolly formal. Sterling sat, thrown off balance. "What is this?" he sneered at Rosalind. "Are you trying to sue me? You can't afford a firm like this, darling." "Mr. Abernathy is my family's legal counsel," she said, her voice steady. "He is here to present the terms of our divorce." Sterling laughed until Abernathy slid a document across the table. His smirk vanished as his eyes fell upon the plaintiff's name. Rosalind Vanderbilt Hayes. He looked from the paper to her, his face paling. "Vanderbilt, what kind of joke is this?" "It's no joke," Rosalind said quietly. "My grandfather is Cornelius Vanderbilt." The name landed with the force of a physical blow, shattering Sterling's entire reality. He was a minnow who had been mocking a leviathan. You lied to me," he stammered. "I omitted," she corrected. "I wanted to be loved for who I was. You saw a project, a charity case." Her use of his own cruel words struck him dumb. As if on cue, Abernathy tapped a second, thicker file. "This dossier details your company's financial irregularities, Mr. Blackwood. The SEC would find it very compelling." Sterling was trapped. Rosalind laid out the ultimatum with chilling precision. He would sign the divorce petition and a permanent NDA. In return for his silence, he would receive a settlement. He would then vanish from her life and the life of their child forever. "My child," he choked, a last desperate grasp for leverage. "Your heir," Rosalind's voice was ice. "The one you hoped wouldn't inherit my simple sensibilities? Do not worry. Our child will be raised as a Vanderbilt, free from your cruelty and shallow ambition. You will not be a part of their world." Defeated, the titan of industry crumbled. With a trembling hand, he signed his life away and walked out of the room, a ghost. Weeks later, Rosalind stood on the terrace of the Vanderbilt estate. She had reconciled with her grandfather before he passed, and he died knowing his legacy was in strong hands. Now the chairman of his global empire, she felt the baby kick. Sterling had tried to define her worth with diamonds and insults, never realizing her true power was a heritage she carried within. The poor wife was gone, and in her place stood a queen, ready to rule. Rosalind's story is a powerful reminder that our true worth is never defined by someone else's opinion or by the price tag they try to put on us. It's a fire that burns within, a legacy of strength that we carry in our spirit, whether we come from a palace or a quiet street. She endured the mockery and humiliation, believing her value was diminished, only to discover that she held an empire in her hands the entire time. Her journey wasn't just about inheriting a fortune, it was about inheriting her own power and self-worth. What did you think of Sterling's downfall? Was it justified? What would you have done in Rosalind's position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of justice and empowerment, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own inner strength. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story that makes you think, feel, and triumph.